Permission to share. Church, I need your permission. Do you really think I need your permission, really? No. Because I'd do it anyway, so. The last time this reading came about, have you ever shared something in your life, especially in a more public forum, and then realized you've overshared? Now, it's your version of oversharing. And then you feel extremely vulnerable, and you feel there's something missing and there's a big void. When I did this reading last year, I felt that way. I couldn't sleep that night. Because what had happened was when I was asking myself the question, or rather when Jesus was said, Aidan, who do you say that I am? The words got choked up, and they weren't clear, and I bet you there's not one of you in church remember that, because I can't even remember what I had for lunch yesterday, so it's hard to remember what somebody, but it was a big deal for me. And the next day I called up a friend, and I went over and just stood and cried, because I realized I was not as good a Christian, not as good at answering the question, and I was not prepared to understand that I was just like Peter. In fact, Peter is given the keys of the kingdom, and in the first reading, all of the authority comes from God. God has given the life. God has given this consciousness that Jesus is recognizing in Peter. Collectively, it's just not to Peter, it's to all of them collectively. He's been given the keys of the kingdom, and he's standing on the rock that is Peter, that is Christ. Peter means rock, and we are always pointing to Christ, amen? So I was not really, in my emotion, it's clear, I was not believing that. And it was a little moment of a crisis of faith, or maybe a crisis of embarrassment, to realize that at times all of us are a little vulnerable in our faith. And if we're sitting there listening, as we're invited to do today, each one of us have to answer that question. There's no getting out of it. It's not Peter 2,000 years ago, and it's not the prophet from way back then. All authority has been given to our faith in this place and at this time. Amen? So nobody gets off the hook in this moment, because we're all invited in a very personal way to answer that question. And I got to do that this year. I walked the Camino for a week in northern Spain. And what I loved about the sense of the rock and the sense of community, there was a couple of days where the first day I was walking in the wrong direction. And people literally grabbed me, because I don't speak good Spanish, and turned me in the right direction. I saw that as God in the community sending me in the right direction, even though I didn't speak really good Spanish. And each way along the way, the symbol for the Camino is a shell. And a shell, as you know, is a symbol for baptism. So everywhere I saw the shell, I knew I was on the right path. And every now and again, I would bump into people and they say, bien camino, good walking, or good road, or whatever way that translates. But you knew that at every way along the way, you were not alone. I was not alone, even though I was walking alone, because 250,000 people a year walk that path. And for 800 years, people have walked it. And with all the gift of who we are as church and all of the children of God, made in God's image and likeness, I realized I was not alone. And in that moment, I was able to do, I'm going to send the Pope this message that I created a new rosary. Good luck with that. And I made a few homilies, but more than anything else, I got confirmed in my faith in a way that I never expected to. I realized I wasn't alone. And just like Francis, when he came out, when he was first elected, Pope Francis said, I am a sinner. And in that moment, as Pope, when he came out onto the altar, Pontifex means bridge builder. He built a bridge by one simple act. He came out without all the regalia, and he said, Buenos Aires, good evening to the people gathered. And then he said, let's bow our heads, and I ask for your blessing. In that moment, I realized something very powerful was about to change. That on the rock of Peter, on the Petrine office, on this institution that has kept us together in good ways and bad ways for 2,000 years, here was somebody that was making a difference. Here was somebody that was going to lift us up, not change the rules or the dogma, but bring a God heavenly consciousness. That in Jesus Christ, there is a new possibility for our humanity. That in Jesus Christ, Peter is identified with something new and beautiful in the possibility of what Jesus Christ could do in the fullness of humanity that is for all people, not just the chosen ones, but for all of us. And we are all invited into celebrating our faith in that way. So there's a wonderful gift in this celebration of who we are called to be. And on the plane back from Latin America, when asked, well, what about gay people in the church? Francis says, who am I to judge? Amen? And it's he's setting the tone. And in this week, we are also watching him say many words of wisdom, but he said, we're not going back. The liturgical reforms of the Vatican Council, we're not going back to Latin Masses. And even if they said we had to, we wouldn't be doing it at St. Columba anyway. Amen? It says in that spirit of love that each one of us are called to celebrate our own humanity. That Jesus Christ has done something for us that invites you and I into a real relationship with him. We are baptized into through his death and resurrection. We do not have to keep the secret that the apostles were given, and that we are building our faith. It's about our faith and about our church and about our place and time in this crazy atmosphere that we find ourselves right now. Because ultimately, all power in heaven and earth comes from God. Amen? And it is out of that the alt-right disappeared out of San Francisco today. Amen? And it was a good idea that the mayor of San Francisco said, don't go there, don't give them oxygen, let's just work this out together. Amen? And let's hope there's a peaceful moment up in Berkeley today. Has that been canceled or is it still on? What? Okay. But we continue to pray and know that the keys of our lives have been given to each and every one of us, that you and I have everything we need to live out our life in grace, and that our humanity and our God consciousness is just not about church, it's about being out on the street and treating every human being with the dignity and love that we're all called to do. So church, on this day, on this Sunday, on the 21st Sunday of Ordinary Time, you and I are invited in full faith, standing on the rock, to say, when Jesus says to us in the liturgy and in life, who do you say that I am? Who do you say that I am? And hold that in prayer. Let the church say, amen. Let us all stand together as we profess one faith. Philip. I believe in God, the Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth,